Welcome back to another Out of Spec Bits video. Today is very exciting. I was a Bolt owner for many years and probably drove about 60,000 miles in one, in the first generation ones. This is the 2027 Chevy Bolt EV with the new LFP battery, and it's the RS trim, which is their top trim. And I want to do basically a coffee run or a overview of between this top trim Bolt EV versus this mid trim Chevy Equinox EV. This is a 2025 LT2 trim that is my dad actually owns, and I brought it here so that I could do this comparison. I want to go over what is the ride comfort difference, what are the feature differences you get, and all the basics to just a quick run down the road. I've never driven this car yet. I've only sat in it and looked over things. And so this will be my first impression of this car. I've had many thousands of miles in the first generation Bolt and many thousands of miles in this car. And we're gonna see, for what I believe is the two cheapest EVs you can buy right now in the US, at least the long range EVs like this. What makes sense for you to go for in terms of the size difference and the price difference? So let's get into this video.
Are you guys looking for an opportunity to drive off in a brand new electric vehicle and support a nonprofit fighting for a greener planet? Well, I've got the program for you. Our friends at the CCAN Action Fund are back with their 8th annual EV raffle program, and it is so much fun. I'm going to tell you why you've got to enter. Each ticket gives you 3 chances to enter, and the prizes are absolutely amazing. You could win in the first prize a Rivian, a Porsche, or a Lucid up to $115,000, which is a ton of electric car. The second prize is also awesome. Rivian R2, highly anticipated, or you could choose from a Volkswagen ID Buzz or a Hyundai Ioniq as well. And there's even a third prize, which is the fantastic new Chevy Bolt. Each ticket costs only $200. Again, 3 chances to win with each purchase, and you're supporting a nonprofit. What's not to love? I don't even know which one I would choose if I was able to win. So ditch the high gas prices if you happen to win, and you support a nonprofit along the way. It's a great opportunity to visit evraffle.org to enter. Thanks so much to CCAN Action Fund for sponsoring this video. They even cover state and federal taxes.
And the things specifically that I have written down here I want to go over are the appearance and the size, obviously, interior feel and design quality, riding comfort and driving dynamics, the noise levels. I don't have professional equipment, but I have at a basic level just something on my phone to see, and from my own ears, what's the difference in noise at highway speeds. And then basically head and leg room. If you are actually trying to buy this for a small family, both of these could work, but of course the Bolt's a little smaller. What is that actually like sitting in the back and stuff like that? And then just my basic overview of the cars. One important thing to cover here is the 2026 version of the Equinox versus the 27 version. This is a 25, but they're pretty much the same as the 2026 ones. Right now, there are dealer incentives for the Equinox. There's not yet for this car as of the time of filming because it's so new. The prices on these are really not that different right now. So this, I'll go over the Monroney sticker here in a second, but here in North Carolina, the local dealer incentives I could get came up to a similarly spec'd Equinox in the 2026 year model is about $38,000, and that's out of the door price. Let's go with not out of the door price, just the price they give you, not including destination taxes, because that changes state to state and stuff. A similarly spec'd Equinox is $36,000, or basically right at $36,000, looking at the cash number. And this fully spec'd RS version of the Bolt is right at around $35,685. So only a few $100s cheaper than the Equinox. And when you do in North Carolina, at least, the taxes and destination and all that, they are literally about the same price. The only thing so far I can see that you get with this is Super Cruise, a sunroof, and a few little things like that. Oh, and air conditioned or at least ventilated seats, whereas this doesn't have any of those options, being the mid-spec and this is the top trim. But honestly, for the range difference that this car has, more room, this feels a little more premium, this is going to be interesting because as of right now, you don't get those incentives with this car. Very quickly, I want to interject this into the beginning. This has 319 miles of EPA estimated range, and the Bolt has 262. So that is a big difference, at least on paper, and something to consider when looking at the price differences in these cars, which isn't much. All right, I've got my beautiful paper holder for me. This is everything that comes with this. So our total vehicle price right now for this exact vehicle is $38,940, and that includes destination and all your options and stuff. That's a lot for a Bolt. You know, we all know the high trim versions are at this price, but what are you actually getting? Technology package, and of course you guys can stop and look at any of this, but you get obviously the technology, the rear camera stuff. The thing I really want to bring attention to here is I do not see a upgraded sound system with this. The old Bolt had a Bose sound system in it, and it was actually a decent upgrade because you got a small subwoofer. And it used to have Bose stickers, and GM loves to put Bose stickers right here for any sound systems that are upgraded. And I don't see any of that, and there's no indication in here of a upgraded sound system. So pretty darn weird to me. For $39,000, you're getting a base sound system. And the Bolt that I had previously had the premium Bose sound system, and I can tell you it sounded better than this one. That's pretty disappointing coming from a top trim vehicle. The Equinox's sound system is honestly one of the worst I've ever had in a car. If you don't get the RS version of this, I believe has an upgraded sound system. I think, I'm not certain on that right off the top of my head, but the Bolt apparently does not. Not anything that I can see here. Very strange to me. I like sound systems, good sound systems, so that's kind of odd. But I guess that might have just been a choice that they made for cost. But yes, we get the LFP 65 kilowatt hour battery, 150 kilowatt fast charging, because if you don't know, the original first generation Bolts, of course, had terrible fast charging at only 50, 55 kilowatt peak. Realistically, 50 kilowatts was the most you really ever saw. So that has been hugely improved. We have a faster AC charger now at 11.5 kilowatts instead of about 7.2 or so. And yeah, you can pause and look over all of these things, but at a big point, this is basically the maxed out thing you can get here. And as for the Equinox, remember this is a 2025. These prices are not representative of the current 26 models and stuff coming out. But this is what the trim here we have is the LT2. And this came out to $44,300, but with the tax incentives that we still had, the federal tax incentives here in the US, last year, this car was gotten for only $32,000 out of the door, which is pretty freaking insane, especially at the time, considering the price. Between dealer incentives and the tax credit, we got a really good deal on that. Yeah, you basically get all of your safety systems, but you don't get some of the stuff you get with like the RS trim on the Bolt over there. Let's see, 85 kilowatt hour battery, which we know is more. This pulls out like 90 from the pack usable when it was new. But yeah, I mean, more or less, if you look at the 26-year models, honestly, everything I see is you get some incentives with this, you don't with the Bolt. They're almost identically priced right now, which is definitely makes this comparison more spicy. Now, from the practicality standpoint, let's very quickly go over this stuff. I won't spend a ton of time on it, but for those of you who want to know if much has changed, this is the Equinox. We're going to look at the maximum width here. That is right about just under 51 inches. From the back of the seat to the very edge is basically 39 inches, maybe a 39 and a quarter inches. The more narrow spot in the wheel well here is basically 40 and a half inches. And then our opening height from here is 26 and a half inches. But down here at the end, where it closes and tapers down, would be about 14 inches. So let's take a look at the Bolt. Also, something important to know, this does have an automatic liftgate. This on the top trim still does not have an automatic liftgate, which it's a Bolt. That kind of makes sense. But let's look here at what we've got. All right. So from the back of the seat, it's about exactly 25 inches to the edge. Let's go maximum width is just under 43 inches, and for our wheel well width is about 39 inches. And then our opening, well, what you could actually fit right here on the roof line is probably just under 26, like 25 and a half, but to the seal is just an inch higher or so. But down here, we don't have as much taper. It's still around 14 inches, but it doesn't just cut down for as long, it just cuts quickly out. So yeah, about 14, 15 inches there. I will add though, they seem to have improved this a little bit. This is quite roomy down here, a little deeper than it was before. It feels like, yeah, that's definitely a few inches deeper than the previous bolts under storage here. And then we'll come over here and look at this. Now, while this is bigger, you get a whole thing here, but because this platform is designed to be all-wheel drive, this right here is all taken up by what would be the drive unit. Now this is front-wheel drive, but because they have to share that platform, that is actually a downside to this car. You don't get as much going forward into that. Now the seat in the Equinox here is set to my preferred driving position. This is what I drove here in, and I am about 5'11" to 6 feet, somewhere in there. But while the angle of the seat is a little weird, I've never loved the back seat of the Equinox for that reason. There is tons of leg room. I mean, I could be substantially taller and still sit in there if you're sitting all the way back in the seat. Yeah, headroom, I have about 4 inches, so pretty darn good here. Honestly, they've got it sculpted out really well on the roof line. Nothing too bad to complain about there. I would say getting out a little bit, this does push in on you. And as for the new bolts, let's see. This, I have set my driving position kind of where I'd want it. It's a little shorter here, and if you were really tall, like, you would hit that pretty quickly. But honestly, the weird thing is the seats themselves here feel more comfortable. They're a little more squishy. So in that way, it kind of feels better. I would say headroom is probably half of what I have in the Equinox. So you also have this sunroof in this model, and I don't know if you got rid of that, if that wouldn't raise the roof a little bit. I think it would. It looks like that. But where the head is sculpted out, you don't have as much room up here to the left. But I have probably 2 inches instead of 4 inches of space above my head. And it's definitely comfortable. Like, I don't have any problem regarding that. But I will say the Bolt has always been awesome and easy to get in and out of, because the floor is just completely flat from the carpet to the very edge. So you can really just scrape your foot out and stand up. It's honestly easier to get out of than the Equinox is, which is pretty surprising to me. And one thing I will cover here just very quickly, because if you were a first generation Bolt owner, you know the seat comfort was a huge problem for people in terms of the design and how hard the seat was. It was basically a piece of plastic with this tiny strip of foam and a leather or fabric wrapped around it. There was not much to it. This seat is absolutely more comfortable than that. You're not sitting on top of the plastic. You have actual cushion. I can push my finger into it, and you have many inches of cushion. You don't have like a thin strip. So the seat is absolutely more comfortable. It is more narrow than the Equinox, and so that's just something to be aware of, but it is a more narrow car. It is absolutely improved, though. I don't have experience with the 2022 to 2023 Bolts, but for this model, at the very least, from the first gen, totally better in terms of seat comfort. And plenty of legroom. And if you're curious, this comes on Michelin's, and they are Michelin E-Primacy All Seasons. So that is the same size as the previous gen, a 215 50R17. And the Equinox has a squared setup. They both have a squared setup. But this comes on the Michelin Primacy All Seasons, but it's not the E All Season, which is interesting. And we are on 245 55 19s. So a good bit bigger wheel, but that is to be expected from something larger and heavier. And with all the newer GM vehicles, like this being a 2027, we do get NACS, which means you can now just access without an adapter the supercharger network and get much faster charging speeds now with this new platform. Okay, and here we are with my first driving impressions. This is the first time driving, actually, the 2027 Chevy Bolt with the LFP battery, which is pretty exciting. That's kind of a new chemistry that I haven't seen in GM vehicles, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes. Hopefully well. So, as a reminder, I have driven probably around or close to 60,000 miles in the first gen Bolt between two different ones I owned. And I basically want to give an idea of what this feels like to start compared to the original Bolt. That'll be my kind of baseline there. And then I'll get into, well, does this make sense? Or with the prices we're seeing at the time of filming this, does it make more sense to just get an Equinox for your situation? So first of all, this feels a little more like the Bolt. I mean, like did what I've been driving, bigger, like Equinox. My ID4 is what I have now instead of my Bolt. And this does feel very like darty. It feels more sporty. And yeah, that little small hatchback feeling that you get right off the bat. And I can say for sure that the regen is a lot stronger. You put the regen on high in this, and all of GM's newer vehicles, they have got some hard regen. I will show here. I'm at 40 something miles an hour. If I just go off regen, this is on high. We slow down pretty darn aggressively. And then if we come back up to speed, we'll give her a little acceleration. Oh yeah, good little Bolt sportiness, fun. And let's see, I don't think this has paddles. I think this is actually to change songs and stuff. Yeah, never mind, that's to change songs. They used to have the regen paddle back here. They got rid of that, it looks. But I am doing a Dunkin' Donuts run, basically. That's what I'm gonna do with this car, and then I'll compare it to the Equinox. So far, it definitely feels more like the Bolt than a more premium vehicle. So if you don't know, the first gen Bolts had a torsion beam rear suspension. What that basically means is it's a budget version of suspension. We got to turn that one off. There we go. It's basically budget suspension that's more affordable to build a car, but it's not as sophisticated in that in terms of ride comfort and stuff like that. This definitely right off feels more noisy and a little stiffer than the Equinox. The Equinox honestly has shocked me in how soft and compliant and premium it feels. It really sacrifices any sort of handling characteristics. It's very so squishy that you really just slops around in the corners, or if you have to do a very quick maneuver. But it does give you a very quiet, comfortable ride at highway speeds driving around. So that's something immediately, if that's super important to you, there's a clear difference between the Bolt and the Equinox, which would to be expected, being that this is more similar to the original Bolt than it is the Equinox. Because the Equinox really is a whole nother platform to have an all-wheel drive setup and everything like that. Okay, so I've got this at GPS verified 70, which is showing 69, and I'm going to do a decibel sound meter here at kind of a specific point that we can do the Equinoxes. All right, the second bridge is when we're going to start. Okay, and we got some measurements. I want to be clear here first, too, that is of course not entirely accurate. There's no way it's 89 decibels in here. This is not an accurate system compared to what you would get with a true decibel meter. This is not going to be accurate. Obviously, it's not 90 decibels in the car. It's not that loud, but hopefully this will be a comparison where you'll see a difference between the two cars, is really all I want it to do. But I can tell you from my own ears and my own experience that this is definitely more echoey and noisy in here than the Equinox, just slightly. But it is softer in terms of ride comfort than the first generation. It feels a little softer, a little more comfort oriented than the first generation. Okay, and now I am doing Super Cruise, which I've actually never done before, and the Equinox does not have that unless you get the higher trim, which I'm not directly comparing to today. But this is a definite advantage at this price point. You get a pretty cool system. But while we're here on Super Cruise, I want to bring kind of the attention to, all right, if these are vehicles are right at this point in time, as this Bolt is just coming out, or if they are about the same price, realistically with dealer incentives and other things, what is the interior like? Obviously, there's going to be some differences, you would think, if this is the very budget car, and there honestly is. A lot of the stuff you see in here is true plastic, and this is basically just a piece of rubber. This isn't like a wrapped fake leather with stitching on it for the armrest. This is really just a piece of rubber. Your armrest over here is basically a piece of rubber, which is very similar to the first generation Bolt. Now the important stuff like the steering wheel is that more Napa leather soft feel to it. But more or less, you're getting a definite noticeable change in quality in here in terms of the materials used right where you feel them on the doors and such. I know from being in the Equinox, you do have more stitched materials. They may not feel the most premium, but there is some noticeable differences there. And another thing you won't really be getting in the Equinox is this. You get a whole sunroof. And so with that trim level in the Equinox, comparing these prices very closely, you don't get this, which if you really like that, that is obviously something to be aware of and take note of. I'm personally not a huge fan of sunroofs or glass roofs in general, just not a feature that I find very useful for me personally, but it does let in more light. It is airy. That is pretty cool. Okay, so I'm at 85% now, and I did some just hard accelerations, and we're seeing a maximum output of 168 kilowatts, which is pretty darn good. That's more power output than we saw from the previous gen Bolt when I would see peak at, higher states of charge. When I do the Equinox, it won't be quite at the same state of charge as this, but we can get an idea. This does feel a little faster than the Equinox. The power is very similar, but this is lighter. And yeah, we'll just really do it based on impression and see what it feels like and what the kilowatt output numbers look like versus weight, basically. So that is pretty much my basic review and look at this. I think this is very similar to the old Bolt, but it has been improved and modernized in many ways that the Bolt needed to be. And honestly, that's pretty positive. I can't say anything too bad if you want the Bolt experience. One thing I will mention about the power I just talked about. This has 210 horsepower and the Equinox has 220, but the weight is substantially different, so that's definitely why this feels a little faster. Also, this only has 169 pound-feet of torque, which is fascinating to me because the old Bolts had somewhere around 270. But apparently GM has changed the final drive ratio such that what you feel at the wheels is about exactly the same, and they can make the whole final drive and gear assembly and everything smaller, which I find very cool. So what you actually feel is very, very similar to the old Bolt. Okay, and here we are in the 2025 Chevy Equinox. I'm going to be doing that same route. Of course, here on initial impressions, we do have a bigger screen, just kind of more clean looking. Obviously nice. And we are off. Now, immediately getting out of the Bolt, coming back to this, you feel a little taller. This feels more like, if anyone knows what a Camaro is like, you feel a little more in a cockpit and you've got this big center console compared to the openness of the Bolt. You don't have that. You have a black headliner, so you don't have the sunroof and all that. You do hear more motor whine and noise in the Bolt compared to this. I immediately at low speeds can hear that little, or inverter motor whine, whichever it is, in the Bolt a lot more than this. You do feel more isolated and floaty in this. Immediately just turning, I can feel everything is very soft. And there's a noticeable difference there. Now I'm gonna do a quick power output check, and this is only 57% compared to 85% or so when I did the Bolt, but let's see. Yeah, so the most we saw was 166 kilowatts. So at the same battery percentage, you might see a couple kilowatts more out of this compared to the Bolt, but the Bolt does feel faster because it's so much lighter. It doesn't just toss its weight around and all this, you know, because this weighs substantially more than the Bolt because it's a much bigger battery, bigger platform, all of that. But from the standpoint of pure comfort, this is clearly superior. There's just no doubt of that. It doesn't feel as eager or like it light on its feet, like it wants to have fun and be tossed around. I've honestly said the Bolt is much more fun to drive around town than this car or like even my ID4 because it feels so much heavier and your movements are so just more dramatic with this compared to the Bolt. So from the standpoint of interior quality, I mean, they both have their ups and downs, I guess. It depends on what you like, but you do get more materials laid over foam is how I would describe it. I don't know the exact technical term, but this has foam underneath it and it's squishy and you have like a material that wraps over it. That's usually a step up in terms of quality. The Bolt, you're basically getting just a piece of rubber that's injected to fit into that spot, and it's not, doesn't really feel great. You do have softer materials that are wrapped with foam here. This has got stitching in it with a little bit of foam underneath it. You know, there's a little bit of upscale from the Bolt, of course. But you do notice that, and merging onto the highway here, I can immediately tell this is quieter and a little softer. I mean, it's floaty to the point of almost being Cadillac-esque to me. I'm gonna find our speed here, GPS verify our speed, and then I'll do our kind of decibel check here in a little bit to see if there is truly a tangible difference. Okay, and here we are across the second bridge, and I'm gonna start now. Okay, well, we've had to slow down a little bit here with traffic, but what you can see there compared to if we put a side-by-side with the, just from looking at it, with the Bolt is clearly, that is substantially quieter. Obviously, this number I wouldn't say is accurate, but the difference between the number is probably pretty accurate. So you're definitely looking at, I mean, I can tell it's much quieter in here, but looking at the numbers on this, there's a noticeable step down in noise on here. So that, again, that's something to think about when you're looking at this is, okay, this is really a class up in terms of premium feel, in terms of driving and comfort and stuff like that. So that's just always something to keep in your mind, especially when we consider how similar the prices are right now on these. You know, you are kind of torn between two things here because while we don't have Super Cruise on this, which is a real bummer on the highway for road trips, it is just more quiet and comfortable. So it really depends on what you want the most. Well, that is pretty much it for my review of these two, or comparison of these two vehicles, and my focus on the Bolt, of course, being very new, very exciting to see something with good charging and a good price. But what is my final recommendation? I mean, obviously you have to choose for yourself. This is very much for what your needs are, but I think I have to give the edge right now based on this pricing. With the discounts you can still get on the Equinoxes new, I got to give the edge to the Equinox because, well, this is an amazing car, and once you can, maybe they've been out for several months, the prices will come down. It is still too close in price for me to justify a sunroof and Super Cruise. When you have more range, you know, it's just a bigger vehicle to carry a little more stuff and people, and a little more quiet and comfortable. But that is not to say the Bolt by any means is bad. I think this is a very good and needed improvement, and it hits on all the weak spots that the Bolt had. And I think now this is truly a solid package. Well, that's it for me today, guys, and I'll see you again soon on another Out of Spec Bits video.